for people to jump in. So I
Sure.
would go ahead.
All right. It's asking me if I want to leave the meeting. That's the last thing I want to do. I've stopped sharing. I'll share more with you shortly.
Please don't leave the meeting. Please
No,
don't.
no, I was so excited to get here. I'm not going anywhere. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to the Blue Sky team who keeps letting me do this thing. For folks who have not joined us before, this will be not a talk by me, but a conversation with everybody to participate. And usually the way we do that is two ways. I should say one thing to let you know that we're recording the session, and Blue Sky will post it later. So be aware that we're recording, and that at points where we have conversation, there's both the chat, if you are somebody who likes to type in, but also there's a raise hand feature where if you go to the bottom of it's usually the bottom of the Zoom screen and hit participants, it will pop up a thing that that has a place for you to raise your hand, and we'll work those things out. Amanda will be my lovely support system to make it all happen. So welcome. I'm sitting at my dining room table where since last February, the only other person I've eaten with is my partner, but from which I have now at this point Zoomed holiday meals, ukulele jams, religious services, talks with best friends who are continents apart from me. I've taken classes and taught classes. I have done oral history interviews to record what life is like during a pandemic. And I have done these wonderful Blue Sky salons. And these salons are an extension of what we do in person in the gallery when that is possible, which is really thinking about how we can create community by engaging around photographs and also around poetry. And I will ask some questions, and I always say the point isn't to have the right answer, it's that as we engage in the discussion, we come to the answers together, that the things that you say will change my view of photographs I've looked at many times, and sometimes have said that many times. We're really just building our common understanding. And we were calling these salons the whole time. And of course, a salon literally is a room in a house, but it became historically a name used for art exhibitions, particularly that had multiple artists' work on display, but also for discussing art, literature, politics, culture, and discussions that were located in people's homes. So we should be very much at home with Glenna Jennings at table work in our salon atmosphere. It's like we're salon. And I know Glenna's paintings, or Glenna's photographs rather, are going up at Blue Sky, and they will be hung salon style. At this point, we're not sure because of the new freeze what that will mean about when we will actually get to be in and see the work. But so it's salon style. And for those of you who are here when we started, I scrolled through a bunch of the photos. I'm going to scroll through them again, because before we get to a discussion of Glenna's work, I want to take 2 minutes and do some hoity-toity art history. And you know it's hoity-toity because everything I'm about to read, I have plagiarized off of the Tate's website, if you know that Tate Museum in London. So I need to share my screen and see if I can click and talk at the same time, or click and read at the same time. So here's some hoity-toity art history terminology. In the hierarchy of subject types in the hierarchy of subject types for art established in the 17th century by the French Academy, the ranked order was history painting, portrait painting, landscape painting, genre painting, those are scenes of everyday life, and still life. These were seen as having a varying level of importance. So history painting is at the very top, and still life is at the bottom. And we are looking at genre painting, the scenes of everyday life. Ours are photographs, of course, but we are like the level up from the bottom. Genre painting developed particularly in Holland in the 17th century. The most typical subjects were scenes of peasant life or drinking in taverns. Towards the end of the 19th century, a new focus for genre paintings emerged. Artists wanted to capture the excitement and fleeting nature of the modern life they saw around them in fast-growing metropolises such as London and Paris. The simple and slightly sentimental genre scenes of the Victorian era were soon replaced by bustling street scenes and glittering cafe interiors. But reflections on the downside of urbanization also became a subject for artists. So with that description of genre, and again, obviously we're looking at photographs and not paintings, but it felt like having some context would be useful. I'm going to jump right in, and I'm going to switch over to sharing this PowerPoint. So we'll look at a couple of photographs, then a poem, maybe a couple more photographs. We always run out of time before we get very far because we have so many interesting things to say. But let me share. Thank you, Sharon. Yes, my tone of voice is quite excellent. To share the PowerPoint as we get going. I think that does that. So take a couple minutes and look at this photograph and notice what you notice. And there's so much going on in this photograph that I'm going to suggest that you kind of divide it visually more or less into quadrants and give yourself maybe a minute in each quadrant and notice what you notice and maybe also any questions that you have, and then we'll share out in a couple minutes. So I'm excited to hear what people are noticing. And again, you can use the raise your hand feature. If you just raise your hand, Amanda, I'm guessing we have more people than you can see all at once, right?
For their photos, yeah.
Okay, so if you can use the raise hand feature or the chat, either way, that would be fantastic. But what are some of the things that are?
Looks like Sharon and then Molly would like to chime in.
Okay, Sharon, please start us off. Sharon, you are muted. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Right.
Wait, you remuted yourself very quickly.
Okay. Hey. I think, well, whenever I'm looking at any screen, like movies, wherever, I'm always looking at what photographs are on the wall. So I particularly looked at those photographs on the wall, and specifically how much, I guess, Glenna's just doing these table scenes, you know. So that was the first thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because there are different kinds of things on the wall. When you're like, I always say, like, if I'm going to buy a painting, I want to buy one of the ones where they've got all the other little paintings in it. It's like you get extra paintings for your money. That was a joke. Right. So above, on the right hand side up above, there seem to be some of these same photographs from the same series. And I actually recognize a few of them that you may even have recognized that we scrolled past before. But there are also other images on the wall in this space as well. And also a portrait on a very formal looking portrait on the bookshelf that looks like it's maybe somebody's yearbook photo or similar. And then something that might be a different photographer's, whether it's Glenna's or a different photographer's, but definitely a different series than the at table ones at the very top on the left. So this is a photograph that is referencing photographs or is aware of photographs. Molly, what were you going to say?
So I was trying to figure out like where my eye was going. And it's just everywhere. I think one of the things, what's most compelling about this particular image is that there's so many clues and objects that give us a hint of perhaps who these people are, but it's just, it's so interesting, from the reference to the works that are on the wall, the photographs, and even that image that you mentioned, Lois, of the maybe the more professional portrait that is so slight, like we can barely see that and barely see what it is, but we get a sense of what it is. But everything from the glasses to the record player, to the records, to the gestures and the interaction, even the tiny, like you can tell that's a gin, like that gin bottle that's in the back on the shelf. And it makes me want to kind of dig, like see around the corners and around the table, see what is that music that they're listening to or that would be playing at night. And then of course the figures and that relationship that's drawn. So it's just really like intriguing. I want to, the kind of story that I imagine coming out of this, or this relationship and this sense of place. It's just really, really interesting and very full.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a photograph in which we want to create narrative, both what has come before, what's going on, who are these people, what are their relationships. I find that, and I think that that's true about all of the works in this series by and large. This one is especially rich because we, as you said, like we're not just seeing the table, there's what's on the table. Are those goldfish crackers? I believe they are. But also other things that either we notice. Your comment about the space is interesting. I think part of that is also that there's a door behind them. So there's this implied other space that we are peering into but can't see, which I think leads us to want to, sneak in there and see it. You're right that that's Bombay Sapphire. Anybody who's a gin drinker or loves a gin drinker could tell you that. It seems to me, for example, to imply that this is not somebody who is a heavy drinker, because it's not a full bar. I just have my gin and it's there, but like the classes, it's not the easiest to get to. Like I want to read all these details. Those of you who were English majors, like over here, right on the bookshelf, that is the most assigned anthology of Shakespeare plays. So if you ever took a Shakespeare class, you own that book, but also the cover changes every few years. So it probably dates the person whose home we're in. Ari has put into the chat, nice mirroring. They're both doing something with their hands. So we've looked a little bit about the space, but yeah, what do we think about these two figures? And presumably when Glenna was shooting, she didn't just take one picture. She's chosen this particular picture of these two figures at this table. So what do we make of how the figures are positioned? What's the effect that it has on you, whether it's the mirroring that Ari talked about or other things?
Chuck, did you want to chime in?
I'm sorry, are you speaking to me, Amanda?
Yes, I was wondering if you still
Yes.
wanted to.
Yeah, well, I think I can say about the figures. To me, there are 4 figures in this, because there's the doll and the fox on the towel, which for me is where my eye goes immediately. And if you look at the fox's head is kind of at an angle just like the girl's head. And there looks to be some sort of starburst or circle with things coming out of it next to the fox, which is, to me, analogous to the girl's hand. So there's these sort of outer human figures as well as these inner representational figures that are, a 3D one and a 2D one that are not actual people, but to me have as much personality as the actual humans in the image.
Yeah, and I think particularly because the fox is like the closest we have. It's not dead center of the photograph, but it's the nearest figure to the middle of the photograph. and that both the doll and the fox are also framed by the figures themselves, especially with that arm reaching out across the top. Other folks want to jump in?
Jude, would you like to say something?
Sure. I really like the interaction, the woman's extended hand and the tilt of her head and the smile on her face, very loving and tender. And I'm trying to figure out what the little girl is doing, if if she's expressing an opinion or giving a bit of attitude. It's her department is really curious. It's cute, I think.
To me, it kind of looks like she's singing and hitting the high note.
Okay.
And I was thinking about maybe having to do as much with the adult's handout, like this idea of giving a blessing too, which you might
Yeah.
close your eyes to receive, that there's a way in which you can read her as receiving what this, and the smile on that woman's face just seems to be such a loving smile that this child is receiving, but also like Jude said attitude and Amanda said singing, and it does feel like this is a child who is not, she doesn't feel passive in this space, even if she is a recipient of that love. Other observations folks want to share, or questions you have that you are trying to puzzle out and we can address together?
Sharon, would you like to?
I mean, I think it's her gesture is kind of musical, and it's very sure of itself in a way, even though we're not sure what it means, and there's just so much affection going on. It's great.
The child's gesture, you mean that?
Yes, the child's gesture initially.
Yeah, yeah.
It's very sure of itself, even though we're not sure exactly what it is.
What do we make of, what's the effect, I guess I should say, of, she's chosen for this photo an image in which we cannot see either of these people's eyes, which is usually such a big way that we read people and personality and emotion. What's the effect, or is there an effect, or is it irrelevant that we can't see their eyes?
Maybe it's more intimate for them, and we get to see that intimacy.
Can you just spell out a little bit more about what makes that more intimate?
I don't know. I think seeing anybody with their eyes closed or not being able to see their eyes is it's more voyeuristic on our parts as the viewer. And it makes it so we are viewing their privacy, I think.
And Doris put into the chat that she's not reading that little girl as having as much fun. And I'm wondering if you wanted to say more about that, Doris?
Okay, I finally unmuted myself. Sorry. I don't know. It's just, I mean, she is caught mid-movement, so we don't know what happens before or after that movement. I would probably personally, maybe this was intentional, but personally, if I had done this photo, I would have not considered it successful because of the movement of the girl. There's something about it that really bothers me. Yeah, their expressions are not the same, but she is mid-movement, so it's really, really hard to say what's going on exactly. I assume this is a friendly cup, of some remark that she made or some joke they shared. And then I also wanted to say that the part of the voyeur is us sitting. I'm sitting at that table with my plate in front of me that is half cut off. So yes, I am observing a very intimate scene. And maybe I'm in on the fun, and if I was sitting there, I knew what was going on, but I don't. So it's a puzzling shot. I can't decide if I like it or not, or can appreciate it for what it is. Anyways, that's my thinking right now.
Yeah, thank you. And I think like I really crave wanting this to be a warm connection. That's really how I
Yeah.
want to read it.
Yeah.
Even thinking about there's to me an interesting parallel between the woman's head wrap. We can see lines across it, just the way that the bands are set. That to me feels like it's an interesting mirroring of the stripes on the girl's shirt. I so want them to be mirrored in some way and have it to really read it very positively. And Yu Yang has put in the chat that for him it is more of the woman seems to be looking more at the doll than at the girl, and that this also brings in this interesting dynamic between an object and a human being.
Molly and then Molly Major would like to chime in as well.
So we have a new guard and then a major. Yes.
Okay, I'll just kind of building on some of the comments shared with regard to the fact we can't see eyes, but I think then we rely on sort of the gesture and kind of creating an understanding of who these people are without being able to look directly in their eyes. One of the things I thought about the relationship between these two that maybe we all presume, and I presume is maybe a mother-daughter, but the very complicated relationship between mother and daughter, as she has this gesture of affection and she's laughing and maybe even teasing, and the daughter is maybe pulling back from that a little bit, and I know that all too well. So, and then there's the baby, because it's almost like that notion of like being a mother as a young child, that that we're taught early on, is that we care for someone else, and so it makes me think about the complicated nature of, even in these gestures, about that relationship.
And also the roles, right? That when you play with a doll, you're usually playing the role of the parent to that doll, and so she's already pushing away from who she is in relationship to this woman and taking on a different role for herself. Major Molly, please.
I read it as affection, definitely affection. The little girl does not have a chair, so she's not sitting at the table. It seems like she's come to an adult table where the adults are talking. And that, maybe there's music on and she's like, doing something with the music, and the mother touches her because whatever she said she finds is funny or cute or whatever. But to me, she's like coming to the table, not a part of the table.
Yeah, that's a good point about the seating. And I was going to say, a couple people had noted that right now, in this image, we're positioned as though we, the viewer, are sitting at that table. And it'll be interesting to think about whether that carries through in other of Glenna's images as we look at other ones. But I hadn't noticed until you said that, right? That you're correct. There's not a chair. This kid has presumably come up to the table and maybe been summoned by the adults, or maybe has put herself into the adult space in some way. Other things people want to comment on about this image?
No one's hands raised at the moment.
All right, so maybe we'll go on to the next one. I have to wait. There they are. And again, take a few moments with the image. What are you noticing? What questions do you have? How shall we jump in? Oh, Yu Yang has started us by saying, this immediately brought me back to those family dinners where uncles and aunts were getting too carried away by drinks. What, Yu Yang, if you would tell us what makes them seem carried away to you, or too carried away?
I think it's more about the gestures and the facial expressions. Especially, first the man in the middle, supposedly a man, this human being in the middle, the hand gestures, and reminds me, just like for me, it reminds me like some of my uncles, they would just talk. They would get really into like a big topics, and then they would just become very expressive, and they're just looking at the people with a very enthusiastic looks on his face, and some other relative, they might find my uncle to be a little bit annoyed. So then that's why I also feel like the man at the right of the picture has that a little bit annoyed look on his face. And regarding the man on the left, I have no idea what he's doing. Probably raising a glass. That is probably too high. I don't know, but it has a really strong chaotic energy, and I really like it.
Yeah, and I think also there seems to be, although the only bottle we see on the table might be a water bottle, the glass that is center there is a champagne glass, a champagne flute. So the idea that imbibing is happening doesn't seem so off. What about the fact that we have no idea what this figure is doing over here? Like, and I immediately want to construct a narrative of what that figure is doing. But tell me more about what do you make of this figure?
It's like Molly Major, and then Chuck, and then Sharon would like to participate.
Great.
I think, I mean, I've also made a story up about this. I think it's a gathering of colleagues and not family. And mostly because of the paintings and photographs on the wall, that looks like a young, what's his name? I wrote it down. Rembrandt self-portrait. And is that Nathaniel Hawthorne or
Edgar Allan
And
Poe?
Poe.
Edgar Allan Poe? Okay. So I don't think somebody, unless they were maybe a literature, yeah, maybe they're, literature, doctor of literature or something. Anyway, and the guy standing, I thought he might have a camera in his hand taking a picture of the whole table, but I don't think it's family. I think it's colleagues.
Who is up next, Amanda? Can you remind us?
Chuck's next.
So I was gonna say that Poe and Rembrandt are the only figures that are looking at us, the viewer, looking out through the frame, and the actual humans in the picture, no one's looking in the same direction. So it's like what, and they're not looking at each other either. So it's really unclear what's going on. I mean, we're assuming that maybe they're talking to somebody across the table. I'm also sort of curious about the dress code for this event. Because one guy's got, okay, so the two guys, I think the work idea is probably right, although it's England, so maybe there's a different shirt code for men in England, I don't know. But one guy's got a tie, the other guy doesn't have a tie, and the person in the middle has on some sort of fabulous coat over what appears to be, I don't know, a plaid something? I don't know. And yeah, this is in a restaurant or private club, it looks like, not someone's house.
And I think part of that is the, to me, horrific wallpaper. Maybe other people like it more than I do. The weird fact that you're right, that it's not really a painting. It's a, it's a copy of a painting and the photograph are the only ones looking at us, but they're also not hung at the same height and they're not particularly well hung. It looks like maybe there's a little poster gum keeping Edgar Allan Poe up on the wall. And so it doesn't seem like it's a home, but it also is if it's a club, I'm disappointed in their decor. I feel like the gentleman on the right in the check shirt is looking at the figure in the middle, but you're right that the figure in the middle seems to be looking past that person. Not only is there a dress code question, but dude over here, your shirt and your pants do not go together, and maybe you should have retucked before you stood up to take the photograph or to fix the light. People are discussing both of those things. A number of people have noted, okay, some people like the wallpaper more than I do, but there's a lot of pattern going on here. I feel like there was one other person who was waiting to speak. Who was it?
Sharon.
Amanda?
Yeah. So, well, actually, it's funny to see this photograph versus the photograph before, because I feel more like it really feels tighter, because, and it made a difference when you could actually see, like you could actually go around the table and go into another room, and now we can't. And the wallpaper does create a rhythm, whether you like it or not, is another story. But and I never occurred to me that it wouldn't be somebody's house, which is interesting because it could be a club, And but I mean, I immediately just assumed that the guy was taking a photograph, the guy with his arms up. I mean, because I always do, and everybody else I'm always around is jumping up, taking. I don't know. So that's sort of funny, but it is, there's a lot going on there, and you could imagine that it is loud, but I don't know. I like the fact that the arms are, you don't see past the elbows, or just past where you can see. I like that part because it is the idea of we're not sure, and maybe this gesture is like the previous gesture of the girl. We're not sure where that gesture is going, and that ambiguity is what makes it that much more exciting.
Yeah, these are that's a really fascinating point that may be true about all of these photographs, that there's ambiguity, and that's what is the hook for these photos. It is not, they're not about being perfectly composed, even though we talked in the last one about mirroring and the way the arms frame the doll and the fox. I think here we had some formal comments about whose gaze we are seeing, or what's, the glass that's central in the photograph. So it's isn't something to say about the composition, but being perfectly composed is not what these photographs are interested in. They're actually interested in, like, we can't see some people's faces, we can't see what hands are doing when all we want to know is what those hands are doing. And that reminding us that we are both intruding on these intimate conversations, and yet also that we're outsiders because we don't really know what's going on. It seems to be part of this work. I like Molly Newgard put in the chat, it's like a still shot of a play, right? That there's action and dialogue even though you're only getting the still. And that's interesting to match up with what Pat had said in the chat as well, about there's a stage-like space that we're in, but it's pretty shallow, right? If this is a hall, if this is a room in a catering hall or a restaurant, either it's a very claustrophobic space, or this picture is kind of distorting our sense of the space. So different than the last photograph where we could see rooms going past. Are there other folks waiting, Amanda?
No, not at the moment.
And somebody said about the first photograph we looked at, there are so many clues. Maybe it was Molly Newgard. And I feel like I keep wanting to read clues in this space, that even when we're talking about, is it a private home or not? I'm like, no, that seems to be the kind of white tablecloth that is easy to launder. And I can see the creases of where it was kept folded with the napkins that don't really quite match, and the plain white of all of the dishware where this feels to me like a not very fancy public dining space, or maybe it's a private club, but that it's not somebody's own home. But the compulsion to read the clues in the space. So the next thing I have up is a poem. Are folks ready for a poem? Excited about a poem? It's about a dinner. Okay, are you ready? Thank you, Ari, for that positive feedback. I needed it. And I'll read it the first time through. The poet's name is Chen Chen. I invite my parents to a dinner party. In the invitation, I tell them for the 17th time, the fourth in writing, that I am gay. In the invitation, I include a picture of my boyfriend and write, you've met him 2 times, but this time you will ask him things other than, can you pass the whatever? You will ask him about him. You will enjoy dinner. You will be enjoyable. Please RSVP. They RSVP. They come. They sit at the table and ask my boyfriend, the first of the conversation starters I slip them upon arrival. How is work going? I'm like the kid in Home Alone, orchestrating every movement of a proper family as if a pair of scary yet deeply incompetent burglars is watching from the outside. My boyfriend responds in his chipper way. I pass my father a bowl of fishball soup. So comforting, isn't it? My mother smiles her best, sitting with her son's boyfriend, who is a boy, smile. I smile my hooray for doing a little better smile. Everyone eats soup. Then my mother turns to me, whispers in Mandarin, is he coming with you for Thanksgiving? My good friend is, and she wouldn't like this. I'm like the kid in Home Alone, pulling on the string that makes my cardboard mother more motherly, except she is not cardboard. She is already exceedingly my mother, waiting for my answer. While my father opens up a Boston Globe when the invitation clearly stated, no security blankets. I'm like the kid in Home Alone, except the home is my apartment and I'm much older and not alone, and not the one who needs to learn, has to remind me what's in that recipe again, my boyfriend says to my mother, as though they have always easily talked, as though no one has told him many times what a non-linear slapstick meets slasher flick meets psychological pit he is now co-starring in. Remind me, he says, to our family. So now we'll talk about what you notice or what questions you have about the poem as much as about the photographs. It's in some ways a deceptively, seemingly straightforward poem, but what strikes you about it?
Looks like Molly Newgard like to start us off.
Well, actually, I think the last line, that really got me. Remind me, he says, to our family. Like, you know, how much has transpired during this dinner party that was so hard for the host, and where it, you know, where it ended up, or how he saw things as our family, not his family, but our family, meaning him and his boyfriend. And yeah, to me that was, and I enjoyed it. It reminded me of kind of the all the things that could possibly go wrong or not at a dinner party, and the expectations for behavior and manners, and especially when it has to do with parents. So yeah, that's it.
Right, and that the difference between saying to our family versus to my family.
Yeah, Sharon, did you want to say something next?
Oh yeah, I always want to say, it's interesting though. I mean, the awkwardness, and also, the suspense of what happens before Thanksgiving. So what happens? Oh my! So what happens before Thanksgiving? Oh, this is good. And look like I have, anyway, that's another story. So, but I mean, I do think, you know, there's that suspense of before a family meal, like that, yeah, how is it going to go smoothly? And then, you know, always the gay question is always like, you know, I mean, it's always an issue. I mean, I don't know it, but I like the idea of the preparation. We're going to orchestrate this. We're going to make this work. And, you know, I like the idea of the pre-invitation for preparation. I think that's really cool.
We learn a lot about character from the details here.
Right.
Are there things that strike folks? There's this recurring simile. I'm teaching my 8th grade odd daughter and her 2 other pod members about how to read poetry. So I'm very excited to talk about similes. There's this recurring simile of Home Alone. It's both a simile, it's an allusion, not a literary allusion, but a movie allusion, alluding, but also the simile, because it's not just talking about Home Alone, but I'm like the kid in Home Alone. What do we make of Home Alone? Like, what is Home Alone doing in this poem?
I'm just gonna jump in. I haven't seen that movie since I was a kid, but my main memory of it is that his family abandons him when they go on holiday. And so does he feel alone? He feels abandoned a little bit and isolated.
I've never seen Home Alone, so you all are going to have to keep helping me. Jude, looks like Jude wants to jump in, please.
There, I'll mute myself. Seems to me in Home Alone, he's basically left on his own to take care of himself, and he does it rather well. You know, he's in this situation with some bad guys, and he's able to come up with a plan. And I get the feeling in this poem, the writer is telling his parents, you know, come to dinner. Yes, I'm gay, and you're going to come and you're going to have a good time, right? Like he's kind of, you know, coaching them, preparing them.
Right.
And he feels that he's got these 2 people coming to meet it, or not meet his partner, but interact with his partner. And he's got to be brave, and he's got to take care of himself in this situation. And you get the sense that his mom is making her best effort, but then she whispers her discomfort with him coming for Thanksgiving. And the father seems to be almost hiding behind his newspaper, not wanting to deal with the situation, right, or have to interact at all. That's kind of my takeaway.
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting when we know that the mother is whispering in Mandarin, it tells us something culturally about this family. This is a family, his family of origin spoke Mandarin to each other. But there's also a very much an American family, right? Home Alone runs through this. The newspaper that the father's reading is the Boston Globe. He's not reading a Mandarin language newspaper. So I think for me, part of it is that it complicates what I might assume about Americanism or Americanization across the generations. He's clearly an American kid, but his parents dad, at least with the Globe, is not entirely outside of being immersed in American culture either. But the way he uses Home Alone, does it change throughout the poem? So the first time, about halfway down the first column, I'm like the kid in Home Alone, orchestrating every movement of a proper family, as if a pair of scary yet deeply incompetent burglars is watching from the outside. The second time this is the top of the second column, I'm like the kid in Home Alone, pulling on the string that makes my cardboard mother more motherly, except she is not cardboard. She is already exceedingly my mother. Third time, I'm like the kid in Home Alone, except the home is my apartment and I'm much older and not alone and not the one who needs to learn. So why do we need to bring up Home Alone 3 times instead of just 1 time, I guess is the question, or what's the effect of bringing it up? And Zemi has reminded us in the chat that the Home Alone also tells us clearly a millennial kid, right? Amanda saw this movie as a kid. I was too old to see this movie as a kid.
Yu Yang would like to say something next, and then Molly Major, and then Molly Newgard, and then Chuck.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, in this poem, there are two parts that really struck me. So the first one is the on the fourth line, it says, when you read, you've met him 2 times, and then this just like reminds me of a lot of times where queer communities, they have to like closeted queer community members, they have to cover their identity, they have to cover for when they introduce to their parents. A lot of the time it's like you would tell your parents, this is just my friend, this is just my roommate, but actually we are secretly in love, but I just couldn't tell you because they have that fear of this potential storm in the family, and that's what I think this line really struck me as an effort to, kind of soften and give them a heads up of what might happen. And another one is on the right side of the poem, which is, yes, it's the one where Molly Major just mentioned that her mother whispered in Mandarin, "Is he coming with you for Thanksgiving? My good friend is, and she wouldn't like it." And this is another part where I feel really strongly about, especially in Chinese culture. I'm not entirely sure if that's the same in American culture, but like at least in Chinese culture, a lot of times, parents, they love you for sure, but also at the same time, there's a real strong struggle between loving their kids no matter what happened, and their faces in front of their friends, their colleagues, and their community. So I can really feel that and that struggle of the mother, like, yeah, like that the mother might accept the son, but what about like the mother might think, what about my friends? Like what would my friend or my colleague or like my neighbors would think about me, that I have a gay kid? Like what would that look like on my face? So
Yeah.
I really think this is really, these two parts are really strong. And then also another little details on the left side of the poem, which is the lower end of the left side, where he says, "My boyfriend responded in his cheaper way. I passed my father a bowl of fishbowl soup." And this is really interesting little details, because by reading at the beginning part of the poem, I didn't know it was about Chinese family. But then at that little details, I started to suspect this is not a traditional American family, because this fishbowl soup is actually one of the iconic dishes from my hometown. So I immediately recognized that. Just like a little detail that is, this whole setup is not that American.
Yeah. I want to just unpack a few of the things you said before we go on to the next person, right? So the speaker of the poem says, "I tell them for the 17th time, the 4th in writing, that I am gay." They are trying very hard not to hear this, right? You've met him twice before. I don't think that they're passing as just friends. It's more that the parents don't want to accept that they have to pay any attention to this guy. And the part that you referenced about, my good friend won't like this, is such an interesting thing. And Doris said in the chat that she feels like that was similar for her, an experience in Germany of worrying about what other people will think, although it's not clear whether the mother is only concerned about what the friend will think or whether she's also using the friend as the excuse, because she doesn't really want him there either. It's also super interesting to me when we think about the fishball soup. This means that the son is, that the meal that they're having is in the son's home with his partner, but what they're eating is the traditional Chinese fishball soup. And that what the mother is going to be hosting is Thanksgiving, which is like the most American of meal-oriented holidays. So it's all of these interesting sort of flips about the culture. Amanda, can you remind us the order of the folks who are waiting next?
Happy to. It is Molly Major next, and then Molly Newgard, and then Chuck.
Thank
you. So I feel like the reason the Home Alone is brought up, home, he was abandoned at home. They didn't realize that they hadn't taken him with them on their vacation. So he really was abandoned. And like he's put up with this abandonment of who he is for a very long time. And now he's trying to exert control as an adult over how, he's not going to let that happen again. He's not going to let them abandon him or his boyfriend, who is probably not Asian, not Chinese. Otherwise, she wouldn't have spoken to him. The mother wouldn't have spoken to him in Chinese. So that's already, two different cultures, and I can imagine, so he not only has to, contend with my son is gay, but my son is with somebody who's not from our culture. Mm-hmm. What else I was gonna say? I guess that's about it. I liked that he called them, deeply incompetent burglars. Anyway.
Right. The parental incompetence cast is the slapstick meets slasher flick meets psychological pit. I'm going to respond to what Molly Major said, but I'll wait until after Molly Newgard and Chuck get their bits in. Oh, Molly, you remuted yourself.
Sorry, I'll just sort of build off further of what Molly Major said, but I think the more I spend time with this, I'm like, wow, there's a lot going on here. And I feel like actually very emotional. So there's this notion of this young man, it's kind of like a role reversal that I see. And he is trying to be the adult, but knowing that but also within the Asian cultures, and I know because it's half of my own culture is there's a certain deference that you have to your parents. There's ultimate respect, but trying to negotiate that. He's probably a first generation kid. And trying to kind of be responsible for bridging the gaps between his parents and the way he sees things, and then this introducing his boyfriend for yet, whatever, the third or fourth time, and really trying to negotiate that while proving himself as an adult and also doing the things that would make his parents happy, like serving the fish soup. And so I feel it's like really, I kind of feel for this young man, because he is very critical at once of his parents, but also understands where they come from as much as he might, push against that. So yeah, it's really it's rich. Like I see the first photograph that we saw, or both photographs that we saw of Glenna's. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Chuck Barnes, please.
It's interesting I'm not sure who is the person to whom the speaker in the poem is speaking. And for me, the Home Alone seems like it's just this stream of consciousness thread that he's having with himself through the whole poem. So he's kind of established, like, it'll be just like Home Alone. Oh my God, I'm like the kid in Home Alone. And then again, I'm like the kid in Home Alone. I'm like the kid in Home Alone. And there's that point where he's thinking to himself, and then all of a sudden there's this cut in with the M dash where it's remind me what's in that recipe again, which is the only time his boyfriend, I think, speaks in the whole, is that right? In the whole poem.
It's hard to say. It's not clear
It's the first time.
who is saying so comforting, isn't it? I can't figure out if that's the mother saying it to the boyfriend or the boyfriend saying it to the mother. But this one it's clearly the boyfriend speaking. So what were you saying about how the boyfriend interrupts the speaker's
it seems like the boyfriend is interrupting the speaker's train of thought. Like he's in the sort of he's in Home Alone land. He's certainly aware of what's going on in the room, but it's also, he's removed himself from one step from what's actually going on by making this simile. I'm like that. He's imagining the scene of the movie where it's happening, as opposed to I'm in the moment here with my parents and with my boyfriend. So to me, that's what stands out the most in it.
And I love that as he's spinning out, I'm like the kid in Home Alone. I'm not the little kid. And then this one, it's like, except the home is my apartment and I'm much older and not alone, which is a really key thing, right? So Home Alone, that's the terror, is that you're left and you have to fend for yourself, right? He's not alone. I'm much older and not alone, and not the one who needs to learn, has to. And then like, as he's spitting out, the boyfriend just stops because the boyfriend can relate to the situation. As I like to say, our parents push our buttons because our parents invented our buttons. They created and crafted our buttons just to fit their little fingerprints, and that's why they push them so well, right? That he's busy spitting out, but the boyfriend just cuts in with, remind me what's in that recipe again. My boyfriend says to my mother, as though they have always easily talked. That while he is the speaker of the poem, is literally trying to script this from the part, right? From the first part. I tell them this is what's going to happen. Notice how he says to them, you've met him, this time you will do this, you will do that, please RSVP, which is very funny. Like, why doesn't he say, why do you have to RSVP if I'm telling you you will enjoy dinner? Why are you RSVPing? I've already commanded you to be there, attend, and feel this way. But that the boyfriend is not as intensely involved in trying to script it, but instead is creating a different story just by being in a different way. Reminds me, as though they've had this discussion before, which they have never had, remind me what's in that recipe again. And notice that the boyfriend, oh, what a sneaky, smart boyfriend this is. Sneaky, smart boyfriend is asking the mother to share the Chinese recipe, right? So what he's saying is, I don't know what you're saying in Mandarin, but I'm pretty sure you're saying it about me, and I'm pretty sure it's not that inclusive, and I'm just going to pretend that's not true, and I'm going to include myself in your culture despite what you are doing, right? As though they've always easily talked, as though no one has told him, which clearly the speaker probably has told him, like, you don't understand my family, it's going to be like, as though no one has told him many times what a nonlinear slapstick meets slasher flick meets psychological pit he is now co-starring in. But now co-starring is also saying our family, right? It brings us back to where Molly Newgard started us with that our family. I was so excited. As soon as we landed on doing Glenna's work for this session, I was like, okay, I got to find some at table poems. And this was one of the first ones I came upon. I was so excited. Do we want to say anything else about this poem, or should we go on to another photograph, which might be our last one?
I think Chris wanted to jump in
Okay.
with one last thing.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, we had a Korean photographer who was in town who showed us some work that was these couples. And we sort of talked about the work a little bit, and it became clear to her that we weren't getting it at all. The couples were one Korean and one non-Korean in every case. And for us, that was not at all noticeable, but we were not tuned into it. I mean, if it had been one black and one white person in the couple, we would have seen that right away, because that's what in our culture is so unacceptable, or has been up till now so unacceptable. But in fact, I think Molly's observation that the boyfriend not being Chinese may be a bigger issue than the fact that he's the same sex. And I know, in you know, in Jewish culture and stuff too, the idea of if in a family that's very Jewish, the idea you're marrying somebody who's not Jewish is seen as a threat to the cultural preservation. And that I want to echo what Lois is saying, the fact that he's saying, now tell me that recipe again, because now I'm going to be Chinese, so I need to know this, is very canny.
Yeah, that he understands. It's hard to separate out where there's discomfort around the same-sex couple, or whether there's discomfort around somebody from outside our culture, that you're choosing to make the life with somebody from outside our culture, and that as he bends one, he also is bending the other. That is to say, as he pushes past one kind of barrier, he's pushing past the other. Any more on Chen Chen's fabulous poem before we go on to another photograph?
I think we're ready to go on to the next.
Okay, and Yu Yang has confirmed in the chat that yes, that is an issue. Okay. Another picture I love. Take a few moments and look at it before we jump in and start talking about it. All right, what are some of the things that folks are noticing about the photograph?
Molly Major, start us off.
I think it's fascinating. They belong to a group of deported that served America, I guess. And it seems like they're back in whatever Spanish, I guess Mexico. I'm just going to say Mexico. But it seems like with these t-shirt wearing that they're actively engaged in trying to come back. Anyway, that's all I know.
Yeah, so, and I love that Molly's so focused on the photograph that she didn't notice that I have given you Glenna's title for it, which is that all of these photos are at table and then a number, but it tells you where it's taken. So this was taken in Ciudad Juarez in Mexico. And I was so excited when I saw this photograph that I had watched, there's a series called Immigration Nation that talks about our extremely broken immigration system. And in that series, there's an episode devoted to the deportation of veterans. And did you know that was something we did in America? We deport veterans. So, so it is only through that series that I understood that these guys, I'm guessing that they are actually might be folks who have crossed over for the day maybe, but who knows? So it's not clear whether they are themselves the deported veterans or whether they are part of a US-based group that is trying to intervene to bring the deported veterans back. And basically you can be deported for any kind of crime. So in the series, the person who's the example is deported for marijuana possession, right? Marijuana possession. So that's the larger construct. And I won't say more about that until we talk more about the rest of the other things about the picture. Amanda, is there anybody waiting?
Yes, Chuck would like to.
Great.
Forearms, diagonal forearms. Like the one guy on the right looks like he's maybe explaining something or doing like a martial arts move, and you can't really tell what he's doing. And the other guy has this other arm where he's got it up eating. They're both sort of muscly guys too. So we don't know if these are actually veterans or what. And I'm really struck by the guy on the right has a sort of skeleton tattoo on his hand, and I don't really know if that's a military thing or whether I don't know what that means, or if it's just because he likes that, which seems at odds somehow with his like little Julie glasses.
Yeah.
But I think that's just me.
Yeah, you're right that the aesthetic of the glasses and everything else about his physical presentation does seem like a bit of a not quite in the same aesthetic. I also didn't realize until you said that thing about his hands, he's looking over here and we have just the slightest curve of somebody else's elbow. So we know that there's somebody else in this group who Glenna has chosen not to include in the photograph at all.
And I wonder if they're wearing these wristbands that say, I think the guy on the left, it says something like Team America, maybe.
Mhm.
That's all I can make out. So it makes me wonder whether they were attending some kind of like special event for veterans or whatever. It could be any event, really. We're just guessing from the shirts.
Right. Other things people are noticing about the photograph?
Nobody's hands raised.
Then tell us something you notice, Amanda.
I notice just, I guess, how non-participatory the person on the left is being in the conversation. They're like more focused on maybe a spicy hot sauce, or it doesn't seem like a very serious conversation, I guess I'll say, for that person.
It's also interesting to me as I look at these two figures, and Chuck sort of drew our attention to the similarity in the arms, even though, as Amanda said, they're doing two different things. One of them's very intensely in conversation and one of them's very intensely in their chip. But they're, on the one hand, their t-shirts don't match, but they are sharing the same message on their t-shirts. They're both about bring home the deported veterans, but they are really different ages, these guys. So these are not, people who would necessarily have served together. What their commonality is about being drawn into this cause. This one is definitely in a public space, right? We're clearly in a restaurant. How does that compare to the earlier images we looked at, one of which was clearly in a home and one of which we couldn't quite figure out what the space was?
Molly Newgard, want to start us off?
Sure. Well, I guess it just makes us think about what else is happening in the space. Whereas with the other two images we looked at that were, tightly staged, so to speak, I think we were left with kind of what we had in front of us. And I think here it also is beyond the frame. And I am really interested in what she does with what's not included in the images, like this elbow that I can even see some hair coming out of that this other guy is talking to, but also what's beyond that. So there's more of a sense of like community without without really these people being part of that, but a sense of that and what's happening with this group back there and this child here, and kind of a bustling activity, and different stories that are coming out of this. So these, again, these clues, her clues that she provides are really magnificent. Yeah. And the food, even from the food to, again, the figures in the background and portions of the figures. Even this guy over in the corner here, in the doorway. Yeah. Right.
And I mean, one of the interesting things about those other groups that you drew our attention to is this is a very male, like adult male group that we are focused on. That's the main part, right? As you said, even with this elbow, like we can see enough hair to feel like that's probably, I feel pretty confident saying that's a male elbow, even though really, what the hell could I possibly know that? I can barely see it. But we have a child here and women back here. So it's also changing up the like intensity of this as an adult male conversation that we've come into by reminding us that there's also, this space is going to be filled with voices and perspectives and experiences that are really different than theirs. Other things folks are noticing or want to ask about? Oh, Jude, jump in, please.
There are two things that I find interesting about the photo. The fellow on the left is eating, but all of the food is in front of us. You know, he doesn't have a plate, he doesn't have a napkin. Everything is in front of the viewer. So that's kind of curious to me. And the other fellow, the position of his hands, the fellow on the left is looking away from the direction of the conversation, and the other fellow has his left hand raised, almost like he's blocking this guy, or he's creating a block or a wall between that guy and the conversation that's going on. And yeah, his hands seem to be blocking that fellow.
And like, even if it's just a momentary capture, it's so weird to think about, he might be explaining who knows what, right? And
or demonstrating a karate chop or something.
Or even just talking about like spatial relations, right? Like, well, we're gonna, right now, here's the wall in the kitchen, but we're gonna come in and, it could be anything. But again, like so much that we want to know, and our desire to read, like he especially, they both have shirts that are inscribed. His hat is camouflage, which tells us something. The guy next to him, I don't know enough about sports, but I'm guessing that that's some San Diego sports team. If anybody knows better, please tell me. It looks like it might be an S and a D. But also that his body is so tattooed, which is in like another series of marks that we want to read. That Chuck drew our attention to the fact that they are wearing these bracelets that also give us something that we want to read. The sign, we can see a sign that's outside, but we can read it sort of through the window backwards. And I'm curious about, like, if we didn't know that this was Ciudad Juarez, would we even know that this isn't the US? Because I feel like there are definitely, to me, places in the US where you could go into a Mexican restaurant or another Latin American restaurant and have the food put out like that. I'm not sure that I would even know this isn't the US if we weren't told.
Can I make one more point?
Please.
The fellow on the right has a ring on his baby finger. And I think oftentimes people who have a professional designation, like engineers, will wear a ring on their baby finger.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of that ring, and it's pretty thin. It looks like it may have a pattern or an inscription on it, but I can't tell if that's really true or if that's me just wanting to read more into it. And could just be that it was supposed to go on his ring finger and it's gotten too big for his ring finger, which does sometimes happen. But as soon as I noticed that ring, I then looked at all their hands and didn't see a ring where we more typically would expect a wedding ring to be, which is so funny because those of you who know me know that I'm a irate feminist who's against marriage as an institution. So, but yet here I am still searching for wedding rings because we just do that culturally. It's a way to read. Wait, oh, and it looks like somebody, oh, Sharon has, I won't ask whether Sharon researched this just now or whether she came in knowing the San Diego State Aztecs women's basketball team is what the hat is.
I think that the hat can actually be for any of the San Diego State Aztecs teams.
But it's so interesting to me because when I looked at it at first and I was trying to figure out, is that an S and a D? Yeah, I think it is. And I was like, is that like a feathered arrow? Is this going to be a problematic Washington football team sort of name that we're going to also grapple with? But now I'm like, is the San Diego State Aztecs a proud acknowledgement of the heritage of the area as opposed to a problematic Washington football team sort of name? Oh yeah.
Our speaker lineup was Chris and then Molly Major and then Chuck.
Okay, thank you.
So it's interesting to me that you guys identify this as an all male conversation because that plate of food is in front of a woman, Glenna. And she's your surrogate and you're a woman. So,
so busted, thank you.
I just heard on NPR on something, somebody was talking about how Jane Austen, in all of Jane Austen, there is no conversation between men because at that time, you know, there was no way for her to know what two men would be talking about because that's just not something that she would be privy to in any way. And I thought that was pretty interesting. But there's definitely a woman at that table.
You are so right that, and it's interesting because when we looked at the first photograph and somebody said, oh, we're sitting at that table. And I said, let's keep an eye out on whether we are always sitting at the table with the other photographs. But you're right that obviously if it feels like we're sitting at the table, it's because Glenna is sitting at the table. But yet, and I think that this is one of the things that works marvelously across her photographs is that she obviously has to be very present to be taking these pictures. And I suspect the first photograph that we looked at might be in her home just because there's so much of her work hanging on the walls. And that the people we're looking at maybe guests in her home. But she does a fantastic job of absenting herself from them. So even though she's always got to be there and be so present at table, I totally forgot that she was there. So thank you for busting me, Chris. And was Molly next?
Yeah, this is probably not important. I made up a story that the guy to the left is the father of the guy on the right. And the guy on the right is the one that's really involved in this movement or group because he has a much more elaborate t-shirt and the camouflage hat. Yeah, anyway, that's all.
Yeah, I also wanted to read them as father and son, but I think that's in part our never-ending desire to create narrative and narrative in terms of relationships between people too. Chuck, were you next?
Sorry, I couldn't unmute there for a second. So just to reinforce your comment about the problematic logo, San Diego State University is known as Montezuma Mesa.
And why are you sharing that with us? What
I'm sharing that because you had mentioned that is this going to be like a problematic logo about the sort of exoticization of the Aztecs in an American university, but that is sort of that's just further evidence of your earlier point. That's all.
And for those of you who know the higher education system in the state of California, right, there are the UCs, which are the most competitive to get into. And then there are the Cal States, which somebody I knew in graduate school was writing an article I'd never read about how the Cal States were basically created to keep the segregation in place at the UC system. That is to say that you could as there was a growing population of color in the state of California, you could reroute them to the states. So there's a UCSD versus San Diego State, and those are both they're both public education, public universities there, but who gets into them and who moves through them is really different. So yeah. Oh, there's so much we want to talk about. Are there other things that we have not yet touched on about this photograph that people want to draw our attention to?
Just that Glenna needs to get working on her eating. She's too busy photographing. She's the only one who still has food. Everybody else finished.
Oh, you think that that's all her food? I think that that's table food. I feel like that's what gets put out for us all to remember when you used to sit at a table with other people and you could share food. Do you remember that?
No, I don't remember that.
Yes.
That's like the communal, like salsa and.
Yeah, that's how it feels to me, in part because there's so much salsa. It seems like it's a lot. And way back, Doris had asked about whether Glenna has done any writing about this, and Zemi helpfully put her statement about the work in the chat, but maybe is there going to be an artist talk streamed for Blue Sky? Will some Blue Skyian please jump in and tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. It's going to be on Wednesday, December 9th at 5 o'clock through Zoom. And Amanda put up the event on Facebook. So that's probably the best way to find it, but it's also on our website as well. And then like this, there's an Eventbrite link. And so hopefully we'll have all the kinks worked out for that.
Or we will have been trained to look deeper into our Eventbrite email.
Yeah, if you're interested, scroll down and the Zoom link will be at the bottom.
And I'll throw in one other thing, which is that we're doing a Blue Sky book for her for this series, and she's rewriting her statement. She said to make it more personal. So there's a new statement in the works as we speak, I believe.
Don't just say say new and improved. New and improved. That's what America loves.
Well, she's what I've read so far, but it's not finished, but it definitely talks about this project in relation to COVID-19 and what she's been able to do now, photographing people in a different way. So I think it's pretty interesting.
I'm not an academic, but to me, more personal always means improved.
I just, maybe it's worth us all taking a few moments to talk about the photographs that we've seen. Oh, this one we didn't get to. And first of all, I'm starving from looking at all this food. And there are always more photographs that I want to look at and talk about. But so we've got this one, which we haven't talked about at all, but then the three that we have talked about. Is it worth us taking a few minutes to say something about the body of her work? Or are there comments that we haven't, ideas that we haven't addressed, just thinking about the body of the work? And it is definitely true that Thanksgiving is the holiday I do with my college friends, not this year. I'm brokenhearted about it. And it feels like it will do the worst translating to Zoom of any of the things that we've tried to translate to Zoom. So I was craving that sense of being at table when I suggested this would be the program to do this month. But what do you guys make of looking at her work as a series?
Can we scroll through it a little bit again?
Yeah, and why don't I stop this share and go back to the other share where we were looking at, no, that's not the one I want. That's the one I want. We've all become so lithe with life on Zoom. This is one end of it. And again, these photos have been taken since 2005, I guess, from what you were saying about her work during COVID. She's continuing the series now, and all over the world, sometimes with family or close friends, sometimes with strangers, sometimes with students. I'm sorry we didn't get to talk about these guys. I love them too. I love many of them. Maybe I should ask the question this way. Now that we've talked about a few of these in depth, how does it shape the way, since we started with me scrolling quickly through all of them, or maybe relating it to the art history lesson that I gave at the beginning? What do you think about the work, the body of the work?
I don't know if Chris wants to
It
respond
makes me
to
want
this.
to talk about each one.
You mean all the ones that we didn't get to?
You're gonna have a late dinner if you do that. To me, the thing that I want to say about the work in general is that it interacts in a really interesting way with Donna Schwartz's work in the kitchen that we showed, which is she had a blended family with 1 million teenagers in it. And every picture in her series was taken in the kitchen as this place where the family all interacted, even though they didn't have any interests in common except eating. And I think this is a really interesting thing to look at in conjunction with that for people who know that work.
That's good. If we should all remember that one, because one of the poems we didn't get to today would go really well with that one. So if we ever run out of salon content, we'll come back. Who, Chris, say the name of the artist again, because I don't remember that work. So maybe I didn't get to see it.
Put it in the chat. Donna Schwartz.
Thanks. Any other final thoughts before we all go and have dinner?
Yeah, Molly Newgard.
Well, I just wanted to say, like, spending time with this work and thinking about where we are in this world right now. And actually, Lois, you started out by saying that, you know, you had spent the past 8 months around your dining table with the one same person, right? Not that that isn't bad, but what this reminds me of is, and you talked about the notion of genre paintings, which was lower on the totem pole, but I think this helps to kind of elevate the importance of genre for me right now. And it makes me realize how important those moments around the table, which I think maybe I've taken so much for granted over the years, and we all want that back so much. And so she's, again, I see these as nostalgic, unfortunately, right now, but she just does a great job of highlighting the importance of what happens around the table, and the detail, and making me kind of think about my own table and various tables I'll be around in the future, and how they speak to our experiences.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
I don't think we'll ever take for granted being around the table with other folks again. And that hierarchy that I started with, where like history paintings, which includes paintings not just historical, but that are envisioning literary scenes or biblical scenes, the idea that that's the highest, and then landscape is like, and then portrait, and then landscape is about this sort of denigration of the everyday. And I think right now, because the everyday has been denied us, we are so hungry for the everyday that we will never, ever take it for granted again. Well, thank you all for being at my dining room table. And I guess at this point, we don't know when we'll be able to see the work in the gallery, right? Is that correct?
That's correct. When the freeze is lifted, we will make an announcement for our reopening. Reopening.
All right. Well, I can't wait to see the
meantime,
work.
you can see it from the sidewalk and on a big screen in the window.
It's true.
Yes, and on the website, it'll be the same.
Yeah.
And Glenna's website also has some of the same images up, though not all the same, but it's fantastic. And I can't wait to move from this salon to seeing it hung salon style. And we'll also have, I think we're going to plan to do this session in December as well with the other work that will be up. Do you want to tell us about the other work anything Blue Skyans?
Who wants
Oh,
to?
sure.
Okay.
I can do
Yeah.
it.
Someone, please.
The other show that's going up is a 3-person show, Women of the African Diaspora. It's three women doing work that's very sort of portrait oriented and mood oriented and very beautiful. It's going to be great. We're doing a book of that one too.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I look forward to talking about that with all of you then, and everybody have a good Thanksgiving, whoever you are sitting down with, and however you feel about the American mythology around Thanksgiving, which is a little bit colonialist, just
Yes.
colonizer. All right. Thank you all.
Thank you,
Good
Lois.
night.
Thank you. Good
Bye,
Bye,
night.
everybody.
Thanks, Lois.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.
Oh, I can stop sharing my screen. It's too dark. Good night, Amanda.